Welcome to PricePlow. We are here at Sensapure Flavors, and I am so excited about everything we've been learning here this week. Gentlemen, thanks for having us here.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
So we want to learn everything here, start to finish, talking about flavors.
Okay. So this is our second day at Sensapure. So we've actually already had basically 36 hours of intro to flavor. So I'm really excited for this podcast because we've learned enough to be able to handle this conversation. What we want to talk about today is the science of flavor, and specifically breaking down flavor itself and how flavor fits within a flavor system in formulations. Because we talk a lot about dietary supplements, functional drinks, functional foods, and the functions quite often, whether it's adaptogens or caffeine or whatever, there's flavors inherently there, and we have to fight them so often. So today, we're sitting down with Scott and Derek at Sensapure, who we're going to introduce and really talk about their stories, but we're going to talk about you guys as the experts in flavors and how you take on these hurdles in these applications. So let's handle introductions to start off. We'll start with Scott first.
I'm Scott Zimmerman. I've been in the industry since I was very young, putting almost 4 decades. Started out as a production person, did some university education, started doing fragrance work, and I've been a certified flavorist for 21 years now. The Society of Flavor Chemists is the organization within the U.S. and the world that certifies the flavor professionals. It's probably a few hundred in the world. Here in the U.S., the Society of Flavor Chemists is still the sort of elite group to which people aspire to be. I'm a second-generation flavorist. My dad was a flavorist for almost 50 years. He was actually my mentor. So life has finally brought me here to Utah, where I need to be.
And so they call you the maestro here. Is that you're the master flavorist kind of? Is that how it works a little bit?
Yeah, a few of the account managers, when they want things from me, will sometimes call me the maestro. But it's, again, as I said to you guys yesterday, flavor creation and matching. It's part science, of course. We all either have a food science or chemistry background. There's a lot of art involved, as you see, with the creative process. Mm-hmm. And there's a strong element of psychology, too, when dealing with consumers and customers. So we not only are scientists, we're artists, and we're sort of pseudo-psychologists, too.
All right. Derek.
So my name's Derek. I've got a bachelor's and master's from the University of Florida in food science and nutrition. I got a PhD in food technology from Clemson. I've been at this for 27 years now. And so my responsibility is the application lab. So we do wet applications and beverage applications. So our responsibility covers those bridges. So he would make the flavors, then we would build up the system that someone would actually purchase and then consume.
Right. So if we have a project idea, generally we can work with applications. I have a formula, I have a base formula and everything. I bring it to you, and you can possibly build an application.
That would be great. I mean, we don't usually get that. Usually we get somebody that says, I want something that tastes like the color blue.
Okay.
And so
and then we send it back here to the lab to have you develop the color blue.
Among other things, and again, part of the descriptor language that flavorists use, which you saw yesterday, is describing flavor molecules or flavors. That smells green, that smells brown, and people sometimes give us a confused look when we describe it that way. But it's our unique language in describing things. And of course, the first thing we ask when projects come in is, what is the application? To a large degree, that will determine what kind of flavor we use, what solvents we use, is it heat process or a cold process? So the first step is getting the proper information from the customers like yourselves and taking it from there. And then often if the customer is not giving us a base, then it's up to Derek and his team to develop a base.
So no secret that we're out here to talk about an energy drink that we're involved in. We bring out a concept. So we come to you guys, here's the base, here's what we want it to taste like. Can you walk us through at a high level, where do we start? Is it with the flavor? Is it with the system? Is it trying to neutralize the base? Is it going through the catalog?
Probably have different answers. For me, I would say we start with the base, because I want to know what you're going to put in there as far as actives, what's it going to taste like in its native state by itself that you've given me. Maybe you've got ketones in there, you've got something else that has some type of lingering that I don't know about, and I need to know that so he can do his job. So we would take the base that you'd given us, we would taste it at a ready-to-drink level and say, this is good, it's fine, or I need a masker, I need whatever. Then it would go to Scott's group to come up with a blocker, a masker, or whatever particular flavor. If you want a fancy flavor, like I need a purple boysenberry or something. So he would come up with that. But if there is no base, then you'd come to my group and say, I want these actives. I want to make these claims. And from those claims, we'd build up a base. We'd price it out to make sure that you can afford it, and you could still make money in selling it. And then Scott's team would take over and do the refinement of the flavor.
So a lot of times, you're saying people do not provide or have a base
Oftentimes
formula.
they do not.
And are you doing a lot of formulation then?
We do a lot of that.
Really? Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So more sophisticated customers will come with a base. That's great. It's easier work. If you say, I have an idea, I want to make these things, and I need this thing from Peru, we would then find the ingredient, source it, make sure we can price it to secure supply, and we'd build up a base, and then make sure that base is not particularly offensive. If it is particularly offensive, then what can we do? What tips and tricks do we have in our bag that we can use to mask or cover those off notes, and then we flavor it.
Again, I would agree with Derek in the sense that we usually don't begin our job until they've evaluated the base. We know most of the ingredients, something close to the final permutation of the base, because there's no use us spending weeks and weeks creating the most wonderful lychee passion fruit flavor in the world if there's several hundred ppm of alkaloids or ashwagandha or other types of vitamin blend that might contribute things. So we do a lot of vetting and evaluation of what the customer gives us before the flavor lab will finally decide, okay, we need to do this, we need to do this. Unlike 30 or 40 years ago when I first started, or my dad was around, it's a multi-layered approach now. Whether we're dealing with an energy beverage or a plant protein-based meat product, it's a multi-layered approach. You're dealing with fat replacers, you're dealing with maskers, sweeteners, you're dealing with other flavors layered on top. So we see it more as a multi-layered approach before we're comfortable sending something out there.
And he mentioned something that's really important. He mentioned alkaloids. So the human tongue doesn't do a whole lot. And, sweet, sour, umami, bitter, salt. But alkaloids are bitter. Because alkaloids, most natural poisons are alkaloids, and they're bitter. So before you even know it, when you put it in your mouth, your body's telling you, hang on, there's a better and good chance this is bad for you. So humans have 23 different receptors on their tongue for bitter compounds. For sweet, we have 2. So over evolution, we become very, very sensitive to bitter.
Right.
So if you put a bitter compound into it, it requires a lot of finesse to try to cover over that, because your tongue is going to tell you something bitter is in there.
And so there's different tricks, such as like binding into the receptor or blocking, covering it.
Yep,
like
100%. So you've got the taste bud on the tongue. Over the taste bud is a layer of mucus that just naturally exists. And that's why when you taste sugar, it goes very quickly through the mucus layer, so you taste it very quickly, and then it's immediately gone. Sucralose, stevia, the high-intensity sweeteners, take a little bit longer to get through that layer, so you taste it, nothing, sweet.
Right.
And then it takes forever for it to get back through the layer on the other side. That's why high-intensity sweeteners have a linger. So understanding what the antagonist of that is important. So you can say, okay, I know the antagonist for this is going to be that. So you can start to massage those and put them into your system.
How does stevia fit into that? You kind of flowed through sugar, sucralose. Stevia has a real linger and it has a bite to it. What's the difference there?
So the stevia glycosides are inherently bitter. And so, one of the mistakes that people often make when they launch a drink, they've got the perfect base, and they go to a co-packer and they say, I want to make this drink. And the co-packer will say, you know what? We can provide our stevia at cheaper price. Maybe their stevia is 95% pure. Maybe it's Reb A or Reb D. Maybe it's Reb M. They're not the same. So people make that mistake. So the more pure the glycoside, the less other things that are bitter. So you can get very, very good stevias now that are probably 98.5%, that almost have no bitter compound at all. The linger is just a function of the structure of the stevia glycoside moving through that layer to get to the taste bud. So you've got two pieces. You got the bitter part. You got to figure that out. And then how do you mask or reduce the linger by you can use different minerals to make it move faster and slower through the memory, because sometimes you want things to linger. Let's say you want to put something in that makes it spicy or cold or something, gum. And so they put things in it that make your mouth feel cool. And you want to keep that cool, but other times you don't want that. So it really depends on the application.
Can I back up for just 1 second? So at Sensapure Flavors, you mostly specialize in the sports nutrition side of the industry.
Active lifestyle brands.
Active lifestyle brands. This is mostly what you do, because there's flavor obviously for chocolates out there and cigarettes or whatever, but this is the focus here. So it's like perfect for our channel. Okay. And then second, I would like to open this real quick. So.
So let's talk about beverages, because we're kind of here for beverage talk. We just had a fun time on the canning line. The system of beverages, it seems to me, I'm not an expert yet, but it seems like we talk a lot about flavors and flavors where we can have fun, but it seems like there's a requirement of acids as well. I'd like to talk about different types of acids, but if you could break down kind of what your guys' responsibility when putting together a system. Is there anything other than the flavor, the acids, the sweetener, and I'm assuming a blocker? Are there any other components that you're responsible for?
All the active ingredients.
Of course, yeah.
But other than that, no. As a general rule, you need a sigilant, some type of sweetener system, be it natural, artificial, high intensity, or otherwise.
Sure.
And the acid is a function of taste and a function of food safety.
Okay.
So if your pH is below 4.6, you're considered a high acid food by the FDA, and all the bad things that'll kill you won't grow. pH is too low. But when you go above 4.6, all the bad things that will kill you can live. So that's why milks and those kinds of things are processed very, very differently than things like orange juice or Coca-Cola or Monster Energy, because the pH is below 4.6.
And you need to know that because your flavors could be modified by the processes.
100%.
So there's a lot of things to go
100%.
into. So a customer comes in wanting an energy drink. That's always going to be on the acidic side, right?
Yes.
That in your career, like energy drinks came out of nowhere, and
back in the day it was flavored waters, or it was juice beverages still, or carbonated beverages, the Coca-Colas, the Fantas, all of those things. Flavors always played an important role. Obviously we still needed to know what else was in there, but the last 10 to 15 years is where we've seen an emergence of energy beverages, or even beverages that had herbals like ginseng or adaptogens and whatever else that weren't there 15 years ago. So it's become exponentially more complex to get a successful product out the door to the customer. And we may need gums and stabilizers or whatever else for a powder flavor for a protein beverage. And there's the regulatory requirements that customers may want. It may need to be organic or non-GMO or non-GMO project verified. So the more information all of us get at the beginning, the more likely we can save you and us several steps in the back and forth process. And once we get a prototype to the customer, we're 90+% there that we're happy with what we're giving them. So it's a collaborative effort. Everybody in here needs to be involved when we're building something as sophisticated as this.
Okay, so in terms of just like timeline, we bring the base in. If we can assume that the base is already there, we develop a flavor, which I'd like to get a little bit further into, but that's a deep topic that I got to save for after this. I mostly want to talk about the acids because this is interesting to me. We've got citric acid, malic acid, tartaric acid. Why would you use more or less of one or the other? What are the different purposes of these?
So it depends on the flavor profile for sure, and it also depends on what you want it to do in the mouth. So if you're going to go with citrus flavors, citric acid is going to be a better choice because it naturally occurs in citrus fruit. And malic acid, apples, tartaric acid for grapes. So you kind of want to marry the acid system with the flavor. But there are certain acids, like tartaric, has a propensity to precipitate. So if you put too much tartaric acid in there, you get crystals at the bottom. That's typically frowned upon by consumers. So, and malic acid grabs you more on the side of the tongue than the middle of the tongue. So if you want the beverage to feel different, there's no real hard and fast rule. You usually stay with the type of flavor first. But then if they want, sometimes you'll do acid blends. You mostly maybe 90% citric, and a little bit of malic to give it a different profile. It also makes it harder to match. So, you're trying to stave off the competition too, because if you come up with some great brand, Red Bull's a great example. They created the category, and now there's energy drinks because someone somewhere said, I want a high intensity caffeinated drink.
Okay, so you brought up Red Bull and you brought up matching flavors. I'm very curious. The flavor of Red Bull, it has become what's considered to be an original flavor that a lot of people match. Could you talk to us about what Red Bull flavor is?
You want to do that one, or you want me to do it?
It started out in the early days of that. I remember working on it through a third party when I was working at another place. It started out as like a mixed berry type of flavor. I think with Red Bull, the success came less from the flavor, but with the novelty and everything else that was in there. It was a mixed berry flavor. I remember tasting early permutations and going, oh, it's a nice mixed berry flavor, but I've done similar flavors for other products. But Red Bull had the marketing, they had the image of the product, and it was the additives in there that I think took it to a new level. I've seen different beverage trends come and go, the sort of sparkling ice, juice beverages came and went. Back in the day, back in Canada, it was the wine cooler type of flavors that came and went. They were all unique, and they held a large market share for a few years, and then everybody knocked it off.
So is Red Bull still a mixed flavor, a mixed berry? I always thought it was like licorice.
Yeah.
No, it's berry. It's very raspberry forward.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So if you let's say that you hadn't already done this or people hadn't talked about it, and we want to match the Red Bull flavor. I want to do ours. What is the process of?
Easy.
Okay, so you're getting the machinery out.
So step one is gas chromatography. So you take the sample, you prep the sample, do an extraction, you inject it into a piece of equipment called a gas chromatograph, and it's basically a skinny little tube that the flavor molecules have a hard time getting through. The bigger they are, the slower they go through the tube. The smaller they are, the faster they go through the tube. Eventually that paints a picture. So you get these lines that come out where the flavors come out. And then there's something on the end of it called a mass spectrometer. And that measures, it shoots a laser beam basically, and breaks the thing apart. And it measures what comes out. Because of that, you get a picture of what chemicals are in there. His team will get that as a recipe, and that's going to get him about 85% of the way. Then he's got to put on his artist hat because the science has only taken him so far, and he's got to figure out the art part for that last little bit.
So you're going to get a chemical though, but you're not going to get that it's a like XYZ berry extract. You
Nope.
just know the exact like.
So berry extracts, and he can explain this in a moment, are made up of all different chemicals. Like cis-2-hexanol is green apple. So that chemical structure, when you smell it, you're going to smell green apple.
Yeah.
But the machine is going to say cis-2-hexanol at this amount. He's going to know that means green apple. I'm going to put cis-2-hexanol out. I'm going to put acetaldehyde or whatever, benzaldehyde, whatever else is going to be in there. And that's going to give him a recipe of what most of that flavor already is. And then he's got to put on his artist hat.
Yeah, it's the volatile components that so what we talked about yesterday, like the top note flavor components, the GC will give you this kind of cool little footprint, and it'll tell you the time that it sort of flashes off. It'll give you an area of the peak, and then it spews out a bunch of raw data that we then interpret. What the GC doesn't do is all the natural extracts. It's not going to tell me how much vanilla extract is in there or a blueberry extract, or it's not going to tell me the sugars. It's only going to tell me the volatile flavor components. So as Derek said, that's when we get 80 or 85% there, and then if a customer's wanting 95 plus or an exact match, that extra 10 to 15% is what takes us days, if
95%
not weeks,
of the time
to get there. And then one of the old tricks of the trade that I learned from my dad is you'll often drop small amounts. I'm giving away a trade secret here, but you'll often drop small amounts of essential oils in there just to throw off and make the flavor harder
Really,
to match.
they're called obscuring flavors. We
Yeah.
do that a lot.
Can they be
Absolutely.
tasted, or they're just to
No.
mess with other? Really?
No, it's just designed to obscure. So when I make a flavor at another flavor house, I know someone's going to copy it. So I'm going to make it as difficult as possible to copy that. So I'm going to add other things. So when the chromatogram comes out, it's just like a black line.
It's a
That's
mix.
It's a
hilarious.
mess.
So
That's hilarious.
These obscuring molecules, is that why no one's ever like actually copied a Coca-Cola? Because every grocery store cola,
I've copied Coca-Cola.
I've
never
done a pretty
okay.
good version too.
Because I've tried a lot of these, and
lot of that is
so here's my thing.
close.
I've said this a lot of times on this podcast. It's like I've tried a lot of like Mountain Dew knockoffs, Coca-Cola knockoffs, and here in America, I've had Coca-Cola and Mountain Dew thousands of times in my life.
Yep.
And
Sometimes
you're saying 95%.
it's the quality of the natural oils in there.
Yeah, and
right. So if Coca-Cola has nutmeg and cinnamon bark and tarragon and lemon oils, the quality of the Coca-Cola comes from their own plantations where they're sourcing their own essential oils.
And it's also the turn. So like McDonald's French fries as an example. The reason McDonald's French fries are always so delicious and they're crunchy is because they turn them so fast. So other fast food chains, they'll sit in a bin for a minute and they get soggy. So colas are the same way. Coca-Cola moves their material very fast. So the cola you're going to drink was bottled, I don't know, weeks ago. But you could go to a Kroger or Harris Teeter or something and buy their cola brand. That may be months old. So that's a big difference.
Okay, earlier you also mentioned using the acids to obscure flavors. Doesn't that get easily discovered in
No,
the
you don't
the
really use
GC?
the acids to obscure the flavors. You use it to change the flavor profile on the tongue.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay,
you're
on
not
the tongue.
obscuring anything.
Right.
You're just making it more interesting.
you mean the essential oil they were
The
mentioning?
essential oil is what
obscure.
would
Yes,
obscure
I
it.
gotcha.
Yes.
That's funny.
Because there's so many compounds in an essential oil, you put a few drops in there, and you're going to get all these other peaks that really don't do anything.
So if you develop a really cool flavor, do you go to the customer and say, hey, this flavor is a not Rockstar energy drink. This is a great flavor. We should obscure it. Is that going to cost them more money, or do they ask for that, or is this something you just do because that's what you do?
I mean, it depends on the customer and the project. If we've created something unique, I'm going to make sure it's as hard as possible.
Yeah. If it's brand new, it's a fantasy flavor. It's your original idea. You know, it's not like a Gatorade knockoff or something, but you have a brand new idea. Yeah, you're going to make that. You're going to protect that because you can't patent food. So the only way you can do it is you can put trade secrets into it and make it as difficult as possible. But sooner or later, with enough time and effort, someone will match it.
I love it because it just seems like there's a hidden war going on
That's
in
what it
your
is.
world. And I'm not sure if this is the moment, but I would love to get into the education and the 7 years and all the things that we've been hearing about.
I like my kind of question though is because a lot of the flavor matching is that customer trying to go somewhere else sometimes.
Sometimes, yes.
Right?
If
So
they're trying to make a whole new category, then sometimes they want to make a brand new flavor. You're going to put something in there. Other times they'll make a new category and they want something that tastes familiar.
but also isn't part of it like Sensapure makes this flavor for a customer and that customer might want to go try to find it cheaper somewhere else.
That does happen.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, you're a customer. You want to treat them, but this is a very unique flavor that you guys have worked.
I think it's almost the other way around because what I'm hearing here, and pardon me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the other flavor houses do annual price increases, and Sensapure says we will match that flavor and not do the price increase on you. I don't know if that's totally true, but are you down
depends, to? Yeah, it depends on the customer. With some of our customers will have an NDA where if it's a 7 or 8 figure customer, we sign NDAs and we agree that we will not even go near this kind of flavor for not only anyone in that category, but for anybody else. If I've made the most incredible peach ring candy flavor in the world for a particular customer and they're like, hey, we don't want anybody else having this, I'm like, we're happy to do that.
Of course, yeah.
And again, we've there are tons of different flavors that we've made where it's been maybe like everybody's doing blue raspberry flavors now. So now I want to do something that's a little different than a blue raspberry.
Right.
And somebody will come to us and say we're doing a new product, a clear protein beverage, but we don't want to do blue ras. We want something new. So we come up with a lychee dragon fruit. Or we'll
frosted pear.
Yeah, frosted pear. We'll pitch 6 or 8 ideas to them, and they'll pick 2 or 3 and say, yes, let's work with those. And then we eventually get them in. The making the flavor is almost the easiest part, and then we hand that over to Derek's team, and they've got to make this foul tasting or bitter tasting product taste acceptable for a single serving. And it's one thing for a customer to drink a half an ounce, but if they're drinking 16 ounces, that experience has to be wonderful the whole way through, from the beginning hit to the linger all the way through. And you want them to come back and buy another case.
Yeah, how does that work when you bring in someone? You're doing some like quick sample tastes and everything, but that's not the full can.
No.
You can't bring in your customer and have them drink entire energy drink
No,
cans.
no. They have a heart attack.
Right, yeah. So how do you balance that when you have a customer trying to make sure that the full can or the full scoop of protein is going to...
So there's a couple ways to do it. The best way is we have a protocol called Sensory Quant. And Sensory Quant is a sensory panel, no different than anyone else. But what we do is we have a series of panels in a row to get the most data from the panelists. So if you're curious, if your demographic likes this and the can size is the right size, it's the right flavor, we'll do a sensory panel. Otherwise, we'll do iterative development like we did earlier today, where once the base has been properly neutralized, or made as neutral as possible, then we go through the fun and creative part of taking his flavors. Let's say he's got 3 of the ones that you picked, and maybe you want them blended together in some way. So we do that, and then, you'll usually get 1 or 2 mocked up cans to say, yes, this is sessionable, I could drink this, or like, I can't get through this can, it's too much. And so you want to find those things out real early. Mm-hmm. You do not want to burn a lot of time and money with something that someone's going to be like, I can't get through that.
And we've definitely gotten into an era of flavors where it's not just blue raspberry or fruit punch. We now have creams or candies that are, super sour, or experiential flavors that are just not normal fruit punches. And so getting through 16 ounces can be a little tough sometimes.
Yeah, like a rainbow Skittles or a Sour Patch.
Yeah.
So we're always having to be aware, both the flavorist and the product development, that can a consumer enjoy this whole single serving experience from beginning to end? That's where acids and sweeteners and everything else, and even the mouthfeel of the product too, is an important part of it too.
Like those boba balls. Some people love them, and some people find them very off-putting.
Yeah.
And so mouthfeel is very important to some people. You can make a drink that coats your mouth. Sometimes that's great. Sometimes you don't want the coating in the mouth. So those kind of experiential things are important.
Where does that mouthfeel fit into like that, groupings of different? Is that in the acids and is it in the flavoring?
It's going to be in the flavoring and the base.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So he can make a cream flavor, but the cream flavor will only give you the sensation that there's cream there. I then need to do something to the base, unless there's really cream there, but mostly there's not. But let's assume for a moment there isn't. I need to do something to the base to coat the mouth, and you can use lipids, you can use fats, you can use oils. They'd be emulsified, but you can use those things to get that same feel as though you just consumed cream without cream actually being there.
But you can't add more than like half a gram of the fat, though, to the whole
Not
can.
really,
Otherwise, no one wants to see a gram of fat on their energy
Like
drink.
with the vegan-based beverages and even vegan sort of meat analogs, we had to mimic the mouthfeel and the fat by using vegan fat. So when we were doing that multi-layered approach with, say, a vegan hot dog or the vegan seitan, or you were layering on a vegan fat, then a masker for the chalkiness or proteinaceous note, and then a fake natural hot dog or beef flavor on top of that. So you had to mimic the whole experience, because people don't just taste things. They're sensing the crunchiness, the texture, the mouthfeel. That was all an important part of, maybe not crunchiness obviously in a beverage, but for the mouthfeel is an important part of it. That's where gums and fats and other things come in.
Scott, can I just say I'm very happy that you're working for Sensapure and not for those other companies anymore?
Yeah. Irony is, in most of the places I've worked, I never consumed those products. That was my job.
Yeah, you're cool consuming energy drinks, though?
Absolutely.
Like, right.
No, that's different. But a fake hot dog wasn't up my alley. Mm-hmm.
Do you mentioned adding lipids for that creaminess. Mm-hmm. It's no secret that on nutrition facts panels that there are tolerances where you could stay below and it still be zero fat. Do you guys ever play with like 0.499 grams?
Yeah, I mean,
of fat?
so you're allowed to swing on a nutrition facts panel. Supplement facts panels are different, but nutrition facts panels you are allowed to swing, and you honestly do not need to add a lot of fat to get that coating sensation. A half a gram would probably be a lot, but you really don't need much. And usually you can keep it under a detectable limit where it wouldn't even show up on a facts panel. But you can certainly do that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And that's something that people do a lot with calories.
Mm-hmm. Oh, of course. Yes.
I'm 4.8. Okay, you're 0.
Yeah.
5.1. You're 5. So
Yeah.
So sometimes you have existing customers who have already made a couple cans. They're successful, and then who brings the next idea? Do they say, okay, it's our turn to do blue raspberry, or do you just start shooting them out ideas? Like, how does the
Depends on the customer.
okay?
And if they're a partner customer, then yeah, we would say this brand is doing well, and here are your 4 flavors currently. We know your demographic is blank, and these people like this trending flavor. So here's a couple options. Just proactively, do you like them? You don't like them? Maybe they want to stay to their core 4. So that's what we do, and we do that with marketing and sales. Other times they'll reach out to us and say, we need new flavors. We're thinking of coconut. Coconut can be very polarizing. Some people love coconut. Other people can't stand coconut. And so, when they come to something with flavors that can be polarizing, floral notes, also very polarizing. Some people love floral notes. Some people can't stand them. So
we just saw this before with Mike and me. I was like, I love the bergamot. Mike's like, let's do it for me.
But yeah, just having that touch of bergamot did work, but I would never want to drink that.
so like rose and hibiscus, we've done products like that where some people would be like, it's like drinking flowers. Other people love it.
But I also assume that there's a lot of times where you're like, in this case, we threw in like a tenth of the whole formula. Was it? I assume there's a lot of times where you throw in a little bit of flavor and never mention it. Yesterday we talked a lot about flavors where there were notes in there that had nothing to do with the flavor that we were actually intending to talk about.
We really wanted to be at an unconscious level for the consumer. You may not necessarily put the word bergamot on that thing, but our goal is to create a pleasant experience for the consumer, whether it's a beverage or a candy or a yogurt or whatever, but have it be an unconscious thing that they just say, wow, this is good. I'm going to
you want it to
consume
be
this again.
complex. Because if I had not shown you the bergamot and told you this was the bergamot, but I just put it in there, unless somebody said there's a floral note in here, you'd just be like, oh, this is pleasant. And you want it to be like at a level that I like it, but I'm not sure why.
There's something, right? Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
But so let's say you have a new customer, new energy drink coming out, sports nutrition type brand, male audience and everything. They have enough money to start with 3, maybe 4 flavors. You're not going to do any coconut in the first run, I'm guessing. Like,
no.
You start with pretty basic.
They're going to stick with, depending on what it is, lemon lime, Gatorade style, maybe a grape or fruit punch. Citrus
perhaps.
or berry, something like that. They're going to stick
Blue raspberry.
Middle of the road, exactly. They're going to stick middle of the road. They're not going to go with like banana or something like that.
Yeah, it seems like it gets more fun as the success rolls in, and they can do a limited edition launch like that.
We'll often offer LTOs after, say, the first 12 to 18 months, where they go, oh, we're doing well. Could we do a seasonal thing? Let's do an apple cider, or let's do a chai, or something like that, which are usually LTOs. And if any of the LTOs take off, sometimes the customer will roll that into their repertoire.
I'm pulling back for a second to the conversation we were just having, but psychology was brought up earlier. And so like whether or not you tell them hibiscus or bergamot also makes me think about there's a lot of colors around us. So there's sometimes cans don't necessarily say this is fruit punch. It might be Ecto Cooler for this Ghostbusters collab or whatever, right? And how often are you guys making flavors that aren't even like to the consumer facing like what it even is? Like, what
Can
is
we even just bring up this
There are
Oxy-Shred
fantasy
Slimer
flavors.
can?
What we call them fantasy flavors, where it's not a mixed berry. It has whether it's a fantasy flavor like cotton candy, which at least we identify, or a fantasy flavor that's a made-up word as part of a marketing thing, and you just want it to taste good.
Could you talk to us about cotton candy flavors? We have some here from Rise. I mean, I don't think you guys
didn't open that one
I don't
up
think you
yet.
guys did these, but like just in general, you said cotton candy is a fantasy flavor. Blue raspberry is a fantasy flavor. Like,
Absolutely.
how are you guys creating something that is technically a fantasy flavor? Like, what is your mindset with cotton candy?
I've probably done 30 or 50 of those over the course of my career. So depending on the application and the customer and the budget, we don't always have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
And Derek has a portfolio of beverage bases that he will go to at first if he thinks that will work. If a customer says, hey, I want a cotton candy flavor, I don't have to sit down and read all my books and start from scratch. I can often go, oh, it's a low acid beverage, or it's a candy, or it's like a sparkling water. I know something that will work. And we just make sure the flavor meets the regulatory requirements of the customer. And again, everything that we do that's creative will taste internally.
And when I used to work for an alcohol company, and I was in another country, and they wanted a product called Razor.
Okay.
That is a fantasy flavor.
Right.
And you ask them, what does Razor taste like? Well, it's harsh, it's masculine, it's blah, blah, blah. No, it's tutti frutti.
No.
Period. That's what it is.
Yeah.
You could say, I want harsh and masculine Razor. No, you don't. You want berry.
Well, I
That's what
wanted
you
to
want,
use the
with some vanilla.
CHP Labs Oxy Shred can here. It's got Slimer from Ghostbusters on it. This green one right
Oh.
here.
That
Okay, let's
has
say
a
I
flavor,
am.
but, yeah.
Okay, how does that conversation even happen? It says, "Hey, we're doing a Ghostbusters collab with Slimer on the
Yep.
can. Flavor it."
That's exactly how Razor goes.
How does it start?
So he has to come up with. They want something that tastes good. What does Slimer taste like? I don't know. But I'm gonna, if I was being a guessing person, maybe a green apple with a little berry or some vanilla in it. They want it to taste good because who knows what Slimer or Razor tastes like. So his job is to come up with something that's unique and different, so they can say this is my Slimer flavor, and maybe they want to add the obscuring flavors to it to protect it, and then I come to make the base.
I think we're gonna need to taste the Slimer.
Yeah, I want to taste the
Well,
Slimer now.
In this case, I was lucky, to Derek's point, that in this case, the name of the flavor is in the name of the product, lime. So in this case, that is a lime flavor. It's
did.
not usually that easy, but in your case, in this case, it was a lime with a bit of some green apple-y notes, so sort of in the background, but it is essentially like a calamansi lime flavor, if you're familiar with like Filipino limes. We tried a few with the customer. They chose this one. I'm happy. You guys try.
But that's actually how fantasy flavors come around. They'll
Yep.
come up with some wacky name or wacky premise, but really all they want is something that tastes good.
Well,
and
there's other ones there like ecto and all that. Obviously, there's nothing in that, so we have to think, okay, what is ecto? And we'll often ask, what is your packaging going to look like?
Really?
Depending on the color of the packaging and the icons, that might influence my decision as to what flavor to use. So
That's lime, and that's funny. We probably
That's
wouldn't
a
have picked
lime
that.
Plus.
Yeah.
There's something else in there.
I probably wouldn't have picked that up without mentioning lime, because I would have thought about that other thing that's in there. There's creaminess to
I'm
it too.
catching the coconut cream or something.
There's some other. We smelled a few things yesterday that might be in there in parts per million.
Yeah.
So in your
yeah.
world of professional master flavorists, I forget the exact word. Can you tell can people tell? Oh, Sensapure did that. I know his signature. Do you have?
Other flavor people sometimes say that about me because of the 20 or 30 or 40 of the people like me, we all have our style. Mm-hmm. My style, because some of my background was in fragrances and fragrance creation, my style is I want all my flavors to smell wonderful too.
That's
You definitely
important.
have started there every single time we've talked about it. And you know what's funny? I'm picking up on more things after our conversations. I smell sulfur on this one right off the front.
And again, the flavor is only one small but integral part. What brought this over the edge and what sells millions of cans is what he does.
Now this one is more carbonated, I'm noticing, than the rye that I'm currently drinking. Yeah, but the can's kind of going down too. But how does the carbonation play into this?
A lot.
Right. Can
So
you get into that?
So as I mentioned earlier, the tongue only tastes 5 things. So you actually taste something via retronasal olfaction. So retro in Greek means backwards. Nasal in Greek means something to do with sinus in the nose. And olfaction in Greek means smell. So backwards nose smell. So you drink this material, whatever it is, and you swallow it, and then it comes back up, and it stimulates the olfactory bulb, which is right here, which is where you detect all the other things. One thing that happens a lot is if you put bubbles in it, those bubbles help carry that flavor. So it's going to, what we call lift the flavor, it's going to make it much more pronounced. If you have a still beverage, it's not going to be as perceived as flavorful, even though the flavor level is going to be the same. Mm-hmm. So by manipulating the carbonation level, you can make his flavor feel and taste, much stronger than it actually is. Or if I just carbonate to, let's say, a half a volume of CO2.
Right. So when you're developing the recipe of the flavor, do you also provide the manufacturer and the bottler a recipe on how much carbonation?
Yes,
Like that's
100%.
Right. Okay.
Because the manufacturer they put something into a can, they don't care what it is.
Right.
That's the system.
We have
Right.
to care what it is, so we give them very, very prescriptive instructions. What gets blended for how long, in what order, and what's the oxygen level of the can? How many carbonation volumes is it? Do you have to make it a throw syrup? And if so, how many fold is it? So we give them very prescriptive instructions, and for some customers, we actually fly to the co-man and actually sit there and make sure that everything goes perfect.
And you're the guy to do that.
I'm
if
the
it's
guy.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's me.
for first production. And from the flavors point of view internally, anywhere I've ever been, the first time we run a new flavor, the creator of the flavors attends the first and maybe second or third time production of the flavor to make sure it's done right. And then Derek, of course, will fly to the canner. If they're running 5 million cans of this slime or limer, he has to make sure, no, add the acid here. No, your carbonation is only at 1.8. We need 2.0 volumes. So, you have to make sure. That's something we didn't do 30 years ago. Now it's a must. Yeah.
So we're on the topic of carbonation. I am obsessed with these Element cans, and
It's a great product.
I've sat at home with my SodaStream and tried to carbonate electrolyte products, and it is a losing battle in my kitchen. But Element was able to figure this out, and you before told me that that's a revolutionary.
This is a revolutionary product. I mean, aside from being a tasty product, it's very tasty, but this is a game changer because no one, except these guys, have figured out how to put this much sodium into a can. And so that...
And carbonate it.
And carbonate it. I mean, just getting the sodium into aluminum, chemically speaking, is an acid. So it has a positive charge. And sodium, you don't put sodium in there because that's a metal and it'll explode in your face. You use salt. Sodium chloride. When you add it to water, those two little guys, the sodium and the chloride, flop up. They call dissociate. They separate. Now you've got a negatively charged chlorine floating around, and you get positively charged aluminum holding that negatively charged chlorine. Those two guys want to get together and have a party. So what you need to do is figure out, how do I make sure this can doesn't literally dissolve? And so they have figured out how to do this and make a tasty product, and it's fantastic.
That's really cool.
And
Are there
also have the flavor, within that witch's brew maintain itself for, say, 12 to 18 months and still taste good.
Because the carbonation can affect the flavor and the high salt
So
content
the
will mess
carbonation
up
will
flavor,
affect
right?
your perception of flavor.
Oh, okay.
The sodium and the chloride floating around in there will actually attack the flavor molecules.
Right.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
So
And so some of your chemistry is going to get involved with the sodium.
Yes.
You have to understand.
And we do 20, 30, 40 permutations before we're comfortable enough to say, all right, let's run a pilot run of 10,000 cans, and then we put it through shelf stability. We beat the living heck out of it with all sorts of different variables to see if the can and the lining and the flavors stand up.
So when you do electrolyte products in general, where are you happy with amount of sodium? Because
0. But nobody wants 0. So, but 200 ppm is probably a normally reasonable limit. There's a reason that Gatorade is only sold in plastic bottles.
Yep.
There's a reason that it's not sold in aluminum cans. And this is a brand new category. This is a carbonated hydration drink in an aluminum can. This is like what Red Bull did in the early 90s. It is a brand new category.
It's that big.
It's that big.
Wow. Okay.
And
what is 200 ppm with respect to a 16
200.
ounce can?
Oh, in this can?
Yeah.
Well, in this can, we got 1,000 milligrams, so it's going to be 200-ish milligrams of sodium.
No, 200 ppm.
Yes.
You said that's parts per
Yes,
million. What does
milligrams
that equate to? Okay.
Yep.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Wow. Okay. So what about? I'm more on the higher potassium side. I can get plenty of sodium from my food. Is that a little bit easier to work with, but worse to taste? Maybe like a lot of the potassium seems to taste.
So again,
bad.
just like sodium, in nature, as it exists by itself, potassium and sodium are metals.
Right.
And they're also very, very explosive.
Yeah.
I mean, a little tiny bit of sodium would blow up in this room.
Right.
So that's why it's always attached to salt. So potassium would exist as potassium chloride, and you're going to have the exact same problem. Because the potassium is positively charged, aluminum, they're going to repel each other like magnets. But the chloride is the issue.
Well, how about potassium citrate then? You see that a lot more.
You could
in
do
some-
that. You could use potassium citrate. That's going to affect the flavor profile
Right.
a great deal.
Yeah.
Because citrate is a buffer. It's a buffered salt of citric acid. And if you try to get an appreciable amount of potassium in the can to make a claim, it's going to be a very unusual flavored product.
Yeah, it'll end up tasting sort of chalky slash
soapy.
mineralic
Yeah.
soapy.
And so then you would have to lower your citric acid, and then you run into issues with the growth
pH.
issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Wow, okay.
all those things, it's like a seesaw.
Yeah.
Any type of balance. So you've got to try to figure out how to balance what the customer wants versus what tastes good and what is actually technically feasible. I've had people come in like, I want 100% iron. Okay, humans, besides bitter, are extremely sensitive to iron.
Right.
And I was like, that's not going to work. He's like, we must have 100% iron. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you 5% iron. I'm going to show you 10% iron. I'm going to show you 50, which you won't be able to drink. And I'll put 100% here just for fun. And so we tasted 5. That's okay. Tasted 10. Ooh, it's kind of bad. Tasted 50. It's like licking a metal pan.
Right.
And we stopped at 50. But it's there if you want to try the 100 and give it a go. But sometimes consumers don't know what is really technically possible. And they'll come with these amazing ideas, and they're either illegal, or a human won't want to drink it, or it's up until this would be technically impossible.
Like some
Fascinating.
of the customers who wanted CBD or Delta-9 based beverages, and they want to deliver a certain amount, we come up with the same issue where all of a sudden it'll start tasting incredibly that terpenic sort of note, and then we go, look, we can't
And those
do
bases
that.
are
You do
tough.
have maskers and blockers for cannabis, don't you? Or
We
they
don't
go
do
so
a lot
far?
of cannabis for
No.
a couple reasons. I mean, first, we're in the state of Utah, so it's difficult for us to do that here. And then when I worked for an alcohol company, we had spittoons at every station. It's fine, because you can taste it and spit it out, because alcohol is absorbed in the stomach. CBD is not. It's absorbed right there. So as soon as it goes in the mouth, it's in your bloodstream. Maybe not at all the level yet, but after a few hours, you're going to have a bunch of stoned scientists. That's not good for development and insurance issues and all kinds of other things. So we don't do a lot with we can, but the few people that we have done that with, what we've done is we've developed a base, no CBD. We've given them maskers that we believe will work with CBD or THC, and they have to put those together.
Gotcha.
Well, creativity in art. I mean, it sounds to me like it might be a.
We always we're
a
solution
performance
providers.
art.
We try to find a solution to a problem, and the answer is not no. It's yes and or no but. But there's always a way to get around it. And so when this particular customer is like, we must have your flavors in our product, we can't really do the development work. So we got you 95% of the way there. You have to close that last bit on your own.
Let me ask, terpenes are not exclusive to cannabis, however, though.
No.
There are a lot of other flavors that where terpenes can
Absolutely.
be involved. Are there, this is a multi-part question, but are there other flavors where you have dealt with terpenes? And would the cannabis blocker work in those cases, even though it may not be cannabis itself?
So, as far as terpenes, you don't typically, for cannabis, you want to block the terpenes because you don't like the terpenes. Caryophyllene, some of the other ones that can be very, off-putting. But a lot of terpenes, linalool, citronal,
parasite,
limonene,
they're part of citrus
they're
oils.
delicious. And you don't want to mask them. You want to enhance them. So it depends on what it is. Because cannabis is a grass, and it's not the same as a fruit. So you're going to get a lot more green type terpenes. Those people don't like. Things from oranges, lemons, and limes, people love those. So it depends on which terpenes you're looking at. But terpenes, they're super handy. They're great. They're easy to manipulate. They're cheap. They're wonderful chemicals to work with.
I try to remind people that that wonderful smell that when you cut grass,
Yeah.
that is terpenes.
It's those terpenes.
Yeah, so it's a similar situation. Very, very interesting.
So, totally different subject. Out there right now is someone listening to this and basically saying, this sounds awesome. I want to be that guy when I grow up. I want to be that guy when I grow up. How do you even get into this world? It seems like you have to start with some scientific background or whatever. But
mine is
how
much
do we
more
even do
straightforward
this?
than his. His is going to take a long answer. So mine, I just went to school for food science, and so most of the people that work in our labs either have a bachelor's or master's degree, which is pretty standard. There are not a lot of us that go all the way and get a PhD, but I really love the subject, so I did all the way. But if somebody wants to do this from where I'm coming from, you find a school like Rutgers or Purdue or Kansas State or University of Florida that have food science programs, and enroll in a food science program and It'll teach you all the things that you need to learn to do the job, and then you're going to learn actually on the job the difference between academic and practical.
For us, the trainees that we have here, the trainee flavors, the sort of someday will be Scott sort of trainee flavors, most of them start with, again, a degree in either organic chemistry or food science. They're doing 4 years. What makes them become flavorists is always maybe usually a life situation where they've been foodies, or they've been, I've always been curious about the smell and taste of things, or they've been amateur chefs or cooks or something, and they want to go down to that molecular level. So we have 4 trainee flavorists now who we're putting through the 7-year program. We'll be hiring a 5th soon in the next little while. So I post, and I'm not just looking for someone with a degree in food science or chemistry. That's a base level, because they do have to understand the chemistry of what they're working on. But then that's where the non-educational variable comes in, where it might be someone who has a particular passion for food, or they're married to someone who's a chef and they've always been curious, and that's where we sort of bring in the passion and artistic side of what they do, because it's a 7-year commitment. So they're committing 4 years of university, 7 years just to be called a certified flavor. So it's 11 years just to get your career off the ground to some degree. For me, I came about it again in a roundabout way, because curiously, the first 2 degrees I did were not in the area of food science. But while I was doing other degrees, I was working part-time at the flavor and fragrance company where my father was a flavorist and perfumer. Started doing a little bit of this, a little more of this. And then he came to me in the early 90s and said, hey, you've already been doing this for 10, 12 years. Do you want to do the 7-year training? And there's a formal syllabus. And I said, yeah, why not? So I went through 7 years of mentorship. And then just as I finished my 7 years, my dad retired. And then I've been on my own now for 21 years.
It can't be overstated. Like I've worked for a lot of flavor houses, and you have to be very good at discerning smells. And I at the one flavor house I worked at, we actually worked at the same one. It's open to anybody, and you get 10 chemicals. They tell you what the chemical is, and you get to smell it. And then they take the names away, and you have to identify those 10 chemicals. You have to get 100%. Mm-hmm. Then you do it with 20 chemicals, and you have to get an 80%. If you could pass both those hurdles, you can be entered into the program. And I gave that a try, and I failed miserably. So I might be good at my job, but I am not a flavorist. So
Did you fail on the 10 or the 20?
I failed on the 10.
Okay.
I didn't get 100%. I got 80%.
How much of this is genetic?
Good question.
Yeah, we've always talked like musicians or artists or whatever, that the children end up being like just as good at it. I don't know. Maybe it was just as I worked part-time at those other companies, and it seemed like I was not only able to discern smells and tastes, but articulate it. That's as much a part of it. So when we do training with the trainee flavorists, not only do they have to pass particular metrics and hurdles, I need to develop a descriptor language with them so they can speak with each other and with me and with the customer. So if we give something to a customer and you say, oh, it smells like sulfury, or it smells like my mom's oil of Olay lotion when I was a kid. And most people are apologetic when they say things like that, customers, or they say, I'm really sorry, but it smells like my mom's oil of Olay. I go, no, I understand what you mean. And I can look at the formula and go, what she or he is actually saying is there are some floral rosy notes in this flavor. So all of it is gathering data. It's not all sort of measured data, but it helps in doing it. So we have our own kind of language.
Yeah, so the 7-year program, take me through that a little bit. Is that something that Sensapure Flavors sponsors someone through? Is it through a university? Like you said, there's a syllabus, or is it through this society and you have a circle of guys at a table voting at the end? Or?
Right, yeah. So there is the Society of Flavor Chemists. They have a 5-year syllabus, and then there's a 6 and 7 year sort of semi-formal syllabus. We have another senior flavorist like myself who comes in a few times a month and teaches them directly to the syllabus. Okay, this month we're going to do mint oils and spice oils. Next month we're going to do let's build a pineapple flavor. The following month we're just going to talk about descriptors like sulfur, like tonic, etc. And then after 5 years, they do a first test, which is to be called an apprentice flavorist, and then they do 1-2 years later to become fully certified. And then typically you have to be in the industry another 15 years or so before you can call yourself what I call myself.
Wow. Okay.
Or what I'm called.
And how many of you are there in the world?
Not many.
Not many. Probably at some of the larger flavor houses, they will have certainly a few master flavorists. So at the last Society of Flavor Chemists meeting, there was maybe 20 or 25 of us, all sitting around staring at each other, wondering who's the best.
That's awesome.
I knew the answer to that.
That must be a hoot at those parties.
Yeah, it is.
What are the clicks like? Like, what are the?
You want to go to dinner with them is what you want to do. That is hilarious.
Yeah?
You want to take somebody who ruins a Michelin restaurant experience? Bring a flavorist with you. Because you'll eat them like, this has got blah, blah, blah. No, it's too much. And then they get back and forth. It's very Benzoyl-Hydric. And like, it's just a steak. Please, just eat it.
The Maillard reaction was too long. It's too ashy, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, that's it. But
How much? So in those 7 years, you talked about flavors, and it seems to me like a lot of the time we're talking about within a vacuum creating a flavor that resembles something else or is coming from something else. But in this case, we're talking about food. How much of like food science do you guys learn for flavoring, like the cooking or the charring or those things?
Now I've been lucky that I haven't spent all my career in one area like beverages. So throughout my career, I've worked doing flavors for yogurts and fruit preps. I've done flavors for alcoholic beverages. I've done flavors for ice creams, women's personal care products, as we talked about. And now here at Sensapure is the first place where I've spent most of my time doing flavors for better-for-you beverages. So you leverage all of your experience, and then if a customer comes to us and says, I want a fabulous cotton candy flavor, I want a peach ring candy flavor, I can usually leverage something from the past, change the solvent system around, keeping in mind the application, and at least use it as a starting point. And then we'll try it in a beverage. If it works, it works. If it's maybe in a beverage that's going to be UTHT or whatever, then I might leverage it and make it more heat stable before we put it through the heat process. If it's for a carbonated beverage, I'm going to know that it's going to be very aromatic like Derek described. So I'm going to go, I want a lychee flavor, because I know when it's added to a carbonated beverage with those effervescent bubbles, it's just going to pop. So
for me, food science is my lifeblood.
Okay.
And because when he gets the flavor, I have to create this system that is going to be safe. It's going to live through shelf life. And most importantly, it's going to survive whatever process that can is going to go through. Is if it's cold fill carbonated, easy. If it's tunnel pasteurized, what's the heating curve look like? Does it go up and it stays like that for an hour? Does it come down real fast? Is it UHT where I'm just blowing steam into it? So I need to understand those things to make sure that we don't make anybody sick, nobody dies.
So let's talk about hot fill, UHT, whatever you want to call it here. Early on when I was learning about flavors or asking the questions to start to learn about flavors, someone told me that the difference between like buying flavor houses or going to someone like yourself where you create a system is that you understand the heat tunnel that it's going to go through, and you understand what's going to happen to Scott's flavor in that scenario, because a lot of times people just buy Scott's flavor and throw it through and it gets ruined.
Yes.
So could you treat us like we don't know anything about this? Hot fill protein manufacturing. Okay. Can you talk to us about it?
So when you flavor a drink, especially with a protein, you've got to think about a couple things.
Dairy, and so
dairy, any protein.
Okay. Yeah.
Any protein.
Hot fill in general.
Yep. So if there's a protein involved, proteins are big, and they like to grab onto things, and they can grab onto flavor molecules and hide them. And so if you're dealing with a protein, you need to make sure you've got enough flavor in there that it survives, what the protein's going to interact with the flavor system. Then when you decide how you're going to process it, that's where what I understand is what is the flavor system is very important. If he's got a lot of monoterpenes, real simple terpenes, what those are, it's like analogous of a quarterback running down the field holding the football like this. What do you think is going to happen to that guy? Everyone's going to attack that football and that guy. So if you've got a lot of monoterpenes, when it sees something like energy, which is heat in this case, this football is going to be attacked by that heat. And that flavor system is going to completely change. So his system, I need to understand what his system is going to be, because if I know it's going to see 195 degrees for 3 seconds, which would be crazy, but let's just say, if he's got a bunch of monoterpenes, it's going to come out the other side and be very, very foul. So if he's decided that I'm going to put mono and diterpenes in there, into it makes this flavor more stable. It survives the thermal system. So that's why you just go and you buy, just send me a lemon, okay? Maybe that's going to be a gray lemon, but you do anything to it, and you're going to find out how stable that flavor is. So we create custom flavors, like he mentioned earlier. When a customer says, I want to make this, whatever it is, here's my claims. The next question is, how are you going to process it? Where are you going to do it at? And what are you going to do to this thing? And so we can make sure that we insulate that flavor, so when it comes out the other side, it still tastes like it does when it went in.
Are there certain things you simply just cannot or will not do in a hot fill?
I wouldn't do mint.
Yeah, a lot of the fruity flavors don't stand up.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That
Because-
mostly comes down to preservatives. If you're doing hot fill, you don't need
You don't. I wouldn't do the mint because it's of the monoterpenes, it's like the simplest. And you could take some spearmint leaves, crush them into some water, put that in the window of your house for, I don't know, maybe an hour, and then come back and smell it.
What'll it smell
You're gonna have to try it. That's a
All right.
science experiment for you.
Okay.
It is not going to be
Smells
good.
a bit oxidized,
It's going to be terrible.
so, yeah.
But now
Awesome.
that was just 1 hour in sunlight in your living room.
Yeah.
If I'm going to shoot steam through it, no. So I wouldn't do mint, and you also have to compensate for if you blow the steam in, you've actually added water. So then you have to remove the water you just added. So there's a lot of extra process steps when you do UHT processing versus tunnel pasteurized or regular pasteurization.
I'm going to go out on a limb here for a second, but over the last couple of years with hot fill protein RTDs, there's been an issue of protein creating like a conglomerate, congealed thing at the bottom, and consumers are very concerned when they finish their bottle and they get a little bit of mouthfeel on the end. Could you explain to us what's happening?
So that is the protein's been denatured. So proteins have 4 states. They have a primary state, secondary, tertiary, quaternary states. And when the protein denatures, it kind of unfolds and unwraps itself. And when that happens, so you've got positive, negative charges in this big kind of glob. And when I unfold this stuff, now I've got all these positive, negative charges that are available for other chemical reactions that were tied up before. So when that happens, this protein is positive, this was negative, clink. And that was negative, clink. And you get flocculation or settling at the bottom of, it's nothing harmful, but it is off-putting to get this slimy kind of protein sludge at the end of a drink. But it's a natural process that, you can denature proteins beforehand, so you can kind of prevent that. But if you just throw protein into a drink and heat it up, you're not really sure, especially if you got minerals in there, good Lord. Then you're going to really stimulate reactions.
Yeah, we saw a really funny customer service response that told the customer it is completely edible. You can eat that, which I don't know why you would tell a consumer you should eat that.
I think you're probably just trying to reassure them.
Probably reassure for sure, but it was a great answer. This is a big discussion when people talk about putting like vanilla protein in coffee.
Yep.
Whether or not it's going to denature that protein. And,
So you can see that sometimes where you get really, really hot coffee and you add cream and it like immediately curdles. You're doing the exact same thing in a can that you'd be doing in the coffee.
Now, how about pea protein? Is that a different type of?
All the proteins are gonna behave similarly when they've been denatured. The thing with plant-based proteins is they have very, very herbaceous notes. They're very off-putting. So you need to use UHT. The UHT it does 2 purposes. One is it sterilizes the food so it's safe. And just as important, you blow that hot steam into that system. All the volatiles that smell bad are going to leave. And so if you heat it with indirect heat and you heat it with direct steam injection, you're going to get a completely different product. And the UHT direct steam injection is to be much more pleasant because all those bad flavors have gone. Now the rub is some of his flavor went with it.
Right.
So I have to figure out before we start, how much am I going to lose of his flavor getting rid of that nasty pea flavor, so when I get done, I have a much better tasting product and I've lost all the stuff that I just put in.
So basically do a little bit of overage.
Yes.
Interesting.
And it's not always written in stone. So
No, it's
obviously
very
I'm not
variable.
going to give Derek a volatile citrus or lemon flavor that I know a lot of it's going to flash, or some of those esters and fruity notes that we talked about yet. So we tend more towards the brown flavors, the caramels, the
Chocolates,
coffees, the
vanillas.
chocolates, which are going to be more heat stable. There's less terpenes in there to flash off. There's less chance of oxidation and all the other issues that'll happen. And of course, too, with the protein beverages, if the emulsion system, if the gum system isn't proper, that's going to even increase the amount of flocculation
That's a real mess,
and the
that
gumminess.
happens.
We've seen that with a few products where clearly not only was the gum falling out, the mineral base that was added to the product was migrating to the top, and it was a mess. Wow. So, yeah.
So you guys have probably seen it all at this point. Is there anything that you think that we are missing? Like, of all these flavors, is there something that needs to be done that you feel is just not getting done in America? Any fun ideas that you really want someone to do?
You have anything?
And think about
New
that.
categories or flavors in new categories that haven't been done
You
yet?
don't wanna
It's
give it
just
away.
Like, there's so many energy drinks. Like, do we need another? What's that?
Tyra's just trying to throw a jersey over.
I'm
there
always
you go.
on
Signature
the
flavors.
Signature flavors.
Absolutely. There you go. We showing that? That's our buddy Lowry. There you go.
You might know him.
Yeah. I'm always on the websites, either Epicurious and or all the other beverage, looking for new flavor ideas. Every time I walk through a store here, a Harmon's or a Whole Foods, I'm always looking for, I've never seen that combination before. I'll even walk over to the cheese section and see about new savory sweet blends that I might want to try. And the thing we smelled and tasted yesterday, the Café du Paris butter, that was just something that emerged from my creative consciousness, and I decided I want to put this together and see what it's like.
I think maybe more unique fruits, because we
Yeah.
tend to get very pigeonholed into berries, lemon, lime, orange. Even when you come up with Ecto and Slimer, it's still familiar flavors. So if I was going to wish something, I would wish something very interesting, something novel.
Like, grab something from the Asian
Yeah,
table, like
maybe
a
like
delish,
durian
like you
maybe, or something. I don't know,
Yeah.
something that's
Durian.
maybe something that's really interesting and
Durian's the worst smelling fruit there is, right?
it's tasty tasting,
Is it? Okay.
but it is disgusting smelling.
Depends
So
on
how
your
do you-
market. If I'm doing a durian flavor for the Jamaican market, you're fine.
Really?
If you're doing a durian flavor for the North American market,
It's
you're
too
not.
sulfury.
So I do sweet heat flavors we talked about too. So trying to merge some of the heat flavors that are part of the changing demographic here with sweet flavors, like we talked about, like a pineapple habanero lollipop flavor, or a cayenne coconut flavor, or a mango chili, which is mainstream-ish.
We've done a lot of flavors. I remember I worked at one company, and we were making a flavor, like he was saying, for meat, and we needed liver notes. And it was a tough flavor. It was tough to do.
What are liver notes? What is liver?
Tastes like liver.
Copper and
Yeah, but what is that? Like,
I have no idea, because that
Yeah,
was...
I've done some liver flavors in the past. They tend to be some top note sulfury chemicals blended with a reaction flavor.
And it was metallic. It was... it had
Yeah.
iron.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
a lot of copper.
it's a
in
filter,
lot of
so it's going to catch a lot of that stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Basically.
It's almost like a blood taste, a mineralic blood
I can
taste
get
with
behind that, yeah.
undercooked meat, and then we may make it into a Maillard reaction in order to give it a kind of a cooked meat.
But you never know what someone's going to ask for, and as long as they like it,
That
No.
that
That's
iron
what's
you were
important.
talking about before, am I playing there? You've said Maillard reaction
Yeah.
a
Maillard
few
reaction.
times. Could you break that down for us?
Well, that's like whenever you're cooking a product, it's a blend of reducing sugars and amino acids, and then when you apply heat to it, a reaction occurs. So like literally every time you're cooking a hamburger or a steak, you're creating a Maillard type reaction.
a good way to think about it is like toast.
Yeah.
So you take a piece of bread, and you put it into a machine. The machine gets hot. That's it. But the bread comes out, different flavor, different smell, different texture. That's the reaction between a reducing sugar and an amino acid. If you cut open an apple or a potato, they turn brown also. They don't change smell. They don't change flavor. They just change color. That is not a Maillard reaction. So a Maillard reaction is a reaction between two specific things, reducing sugar and amino acid, usually in the presence of heat.
Right, the Maillard reaction comes up a lot when we're talking about the protein brownies and the baked
Yes.
functional foods, because you have the protein, you have they don't always add sugar, but there's sugars in there or whatever it is. That's
Sugar by itself, sucrose is not reducing, but when you add it
okay.
to water, it breaks into its constituent components, which is glucose and fructose, which are both reducing sugars.
Right.
So
Do you guys do functional foods at all? Protein brownies big right now.
we do some on the dry side, mostly in bars.
We know a bakery that uses your flavors in them.
right. Would they send a liquid then, or would they send a
We'd send a
powder to
powder.
you? Okay.
in that case. But when I worked at other places where we did savory, either meat-based or plant-based, we make a Maillard reaction within a pressurized vessel. So you're adding reducing sugars, amino acids, juice concentrates, and specific amino acids to what, for chicken,
Yep.
you're using specific amino acids we talked about. For a beef note, we're using specific amino acids. Usually it's in a pressurized vessel. You're running it at so many PSI for anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes at 110, 120 C. And what started out as just a mishmash of ingredients comes out smelling just like beef au jus.
Yep.
I think it's magical.
It's wonderful. It's neat to see.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm like fresh out of flavors. I could listen to this all day long though. I've always loved cooking and everything. So hearing some of this come together and how you can pull some of these flavors out and put them into foods and beverages. Now this stuff doesn't have calories though, does it? Or is it so minute?
The flavor?
Yeah, the
No,
flavor system
flavors-
itself. Like there's no
I mean, okay. I guess if you
a carbohydrate is
I guess
it,
if you actually took the flavor and ran it, it would have a caloric content. But it's used at such a low level
Right.
that it's effectively zero.
Yeah, we usually declare it on a spec sheet as it contributes a trivial amount
Yeah.
that will not affect you, the customer's panels.
Especially in the
Whatever.
serving size that they'll be using it
Yes,
at.
I
Right.
mean,
But if you put it in a bomb kilometer, you'd actually
you
find
could
something.
you would see it. It would register that it does have calories.
Yeah.
But at the use level we're using it at in a finished drink, it's zero.
Yeah, let's say that I have a standard 15 gram pre-workout supplement. How much of that 15 gram scoop is going to be flavor system on average?
0.1, 0.2.
Oh, like 200 milligrams.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you
So-
can't possibly get a carbohydrate out of that anyway, like just physically.
No.
Okay, very cool.
That's just FDA guidelines. Like it's below a certain amount. We don't list
Right.
it at all.
Yeah.
Years ago, we were involved in, hilariously, Mike and I were different companies, but we were on the same project in testing amino acids for caloric content. And the FDA doesn't allow you to claim calories on amino acids, but there is a certain
are there.
amount.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
There is a certain amount of energy.
Now, talking about trends though, a lot of times this industry started with a lot of artificial flavors, but we've really moved into natural. Has that made your life harder, or is it just that?
Back in the day, 30, 40 years ago, as I
Yes.
described, it was all you did was create a flavor in the lab, you put it in an amber bottle, you send it to the customer, and you waited for the purchase order. Those days are over. Now, what's made it easier is again, 30 years ago, a lot of the flavor ingredients, especially some of the nuanced ones like we talked about pyrazines or thiazole, sulfur compounds that give you nutty notes or chocolate notes or meaty notes, they didn't exist as natural compounds. So as long as most customers were asking for artificial or NNA flavors, you were okay. But as the trend moved towards natural flavors, obviously some of our companies that develop these flavors are like, hey, we're getting a lot of requests for those pyrazine notes as a natural, because customers are wanting natural hazelnuts, natural chocolate flavors. So they started using natural processes to create these ingredients. And now 95+% of our requests are natural. There's a few legacy artificial flavors that we've been selling for years, but most of the requests in the last 10 years for me have all been natural flavors.
I have a random question, but
I have a few others too, but yeah, go for it.
when someone brings you inspiration, whether it's a candy or a food, whatever, obviously, Scott, you can taste it and kind of use your interpretation. Do you guys ever use any sort of lab equipment to try to identify
Oh, yeah.
flavors?
We got a whole lab right on the other side of that wall. So-
But in terms of like identifying flavors on a raw food or something like that,
You put a piece
are
of pizza through the GC?
Yeah, basically what I'm asking. Can you shove
okay.
that?
Yeah, I mean, you could do it. You could. You'd have to do it a proper extraction because the tube is
very
nanometers wide.
difficult.
It would be
Yeah,
difficult,
because you
but
have to be able to pizza is a hard one
just
because
joking.
Pizza would be a toughie.
right, but like it's something where you could
We
really
do it
cleave
with
off a
can.
section and.
We could do it now. Again, ideally, you want the actual flavor itself. You can get a more accurate readout. That peaks and printout will be more accurate. But we have customers who say they don't have the flavor, but I want to match this Rise Fuel product. We can run that through the column that Derek's described and get a reasonably accurate readout, at least of the volatile components. It's not going to tell us how many sugars are in there or how many acids, but it's going to be one step removed, but it's certainly enough for us to move forward. And same with the protein. You know, we can take a spray dry flavor and run it through the GC and get a reasonably accurate gauge of what it is. And then it doesn't measure starches and gums or any of those other things. So in an ideal world, we always ask for the original flavor, but yeah, we can't put a piece of pizza in there, but we can put a can of Rise Fuel in there and take a look at it.
All right.
Yeah.
Way earlier, what was that?
I was going to joke. There's currently a big TikToker that's HPLCing like everything, like Zin.
I used to do that
and
at my last company. I mean, I did all kinds of things, and we would. You can do it. It's just the sample prep is. You know, I've done brownies. I did a Awesome Blossom from Outback Steakhouse once, including the sauce.
You have to just melt it down in a solvent?
No, I added it all to a blender. I took the onion and plopped it in there and added the sauce in, blended it up until it was this disgusting looking puree. I did a solvent extraction of this now puree and shot it on an HPLC and a gas chromatograph to find out what was in it because I wanted to make a bloomin' onion flavor.
That's incredible.
So you can do it. It just requires a bit more work.
That's what I want to do in my future life. So, we way earlier, I thought it was really interesting. We were talking about getting through the mucus layer with stevia and everything. Let's talk about some of the other sweeteners available. Allulose is one that hasn't come up, but I'm curious of your take on that. But then thaumatin's come up a couple of times, and I haven't seen it on a label yet. But it seems like it might be one of the next things.
I've only seen thaumatin as a modification thing where you add it to a flavor system where it enhances. It's not actually, I've never seen it actually be used directly as a sweetener.
Correct.
Allulose is lovely, but it's very expensive.
Oh, okay.
And most people don't want to use it because, you know, people will come in like, I don't care the price. You do when you start to make it.
Right.
And so you have to have an eye, at least on the pocketbook when you start, because otherwise I will give you a Rolls Royce and no one will be able to afford buying it. So you have to balance what you want with what you can afford.
What is the line where you can add it to the flavor? You said it's a modifier to the flavor. Yes. Are you leaving that in the flavor section of the panel? I just mean from a
it would be
labeling
marked as a
perspective.
flavor, and the FDA's got guidelines as to where and how much you could add of that, and it would still be a flavor modification product versus a sweetener.
So I might have had stuff with thaumatin, but it's not on the label. It's in the
correct.
But
It would be lumped in the flavor.
Is there a threshold for sucralose? I'm sorry.
No, there's you can't add sucralose as a flavor modification material.
Okay.
It would have to come on the facts panel. Thaumatin you can.
Do you know how much?
Yeah, below certain levels. I have all the charts.
We just had an email about that today.
All of the flavors are being trained, and we do have one of the other organizations is FEMA, a Flavor Extract Manufacturers Association, and FEMA has guidelines as to how much you can use in the translated to the finished product where
Before
it's
you
still
gotta call
considered
it out.
natural.
Right.
If it's above, and again, please don't quote me on the ppm. If it's above 1,000 ppm, then it has to be broken out as a separate ingredient.
Okay.
But even in the case of thaumatin, I've always used it typically as a synergist with other flavors. We don't usually use it on its own. It may be part of a sweetener system along with a Reb M or a monk fruit, 30 or 50 muggersides. It's usually a synergist with certain other things.
Is this thaumatin a natural? I'm sorry.
There is a
just to catch
natural
me.
and a synthetic. We would only use the natural version.
So can you another question is maltodextrin in some of these? Can that be a modifier to a certain degree?
Not really. It's
Or
more of a process aid.
Yeah, it's
okay.
a processing, and it's
Spray
used
dry.
mostly in spray dries as
Right.
part of the
The carrier system. And you could replace it with corn or rice or something else, or even gum arabic, but that is a facilitator that helps bind the flavor system so it can actually go through the dryer.
Gotcha. And my final question, for me at least, is can you really quickly describe the differences between the different like stevia glycosides, Reb, M, A, like?
So the bulk one that's used in the industry is A. Sorry. D and M are relatively new, and really the crux is what's good or bad about stevia A is how pure it is. And as the purity goes up, the price goes up. So you can get a 98.5% pure stevia. It's very expensive, but it's very nice. Most people settle for a 95%. There are some 70s out there that are really foul, but they're, back in the day when they hadn't purifications yet, that's what you got. And so that's where a lot of the maskers and blockers came from, because people wanted these natural, non-nutritive sweeteners that are high intensity, but they were so bitter that you couldn't work with them. So now that they've really almost perfected the purification of the stevia A-riboglycoside, it's really, really good. M is nice, but you can't cook with it.
Okay.
There's other issues where you heat it up, and we had an intern here a few weeks ago, and we were making flavors for a trade show. And we gave her a project, and she decided she wanted to make and use stevia M in a hot nighttime drink. We learned to do it. You learn a lot by failure. Just fail small. But she learned very quickly why you do not heat up Reb M. And so, and then she switched to Reb A.
Foul.
It was terrible. But it was really, really terrible.
And that was the fermented Reb M too?
I don't remember which one she used, but we all tried it. I mean, most of us knew what was going to happen, but you learn a lot by that really is really awful versus somebody telling you it's awful. Sometimes you got to go out and
It
do
needs
it
to stick
yourself.
to memory better.
You'll remember it.
You smelled and tasted it.
Okay, so we're rounding out on the back end of this. I think we have about 15 minutes left before we really need to start moving. I want to go through your applications that you just recently finished for promotional.
Okay.
Like supply
SupplySide
side.
West is coming
Right.
up.
We,
So.
We've tried a few of these in the past, so I'm not actually sure which one of these are new.
I don't believe we've had any new ones here.
No, those are from last year. So
Right.
those
Yeah,
are
I don't.
more
All
for
the
show
new
right
ones, we don't have any because all the raw materials are being shipped directly to the co-packer in California.
What are your
Okay.
So what concepts are you excited to talk about though this year at SupplySide West?
So let's see. I'm going to need to get the sheet to find out what we sent.
Oh, okay.
Because I did not do any of those developments, and we gave each one in the lab, and including the two interns, a product. You come up with the idea,
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
and then we let them run with it, and then we presented it to marketing, and they said, we like these 4. These are what we're going to go with. And then we jettisoned
Great.
the other ones.
And they came
Cool.
to me, the scientists, and I was very happy to hear they wanted to think outside the box with flavors then. So they came to me with, can you do some citrus floral things? So I did things like blood orange marigold, right?
We do have
Or I
one that
did-
was neat.
yeah.
She used elderflower.
Elderflower, which
Yep,
I did,
she did.
yes.
She took Saint Germain, the liqueur.
Saint-Germain
Yep.
liqueur, yeah.
It's elderflower liqueur. It's delicious if you've never had it. It's fantastic. Anyway, we bought it. We brought it in here. We deconstructed it, made a flavor for it, and we did a elderflower hibiscus. I think it was a nootropic drink. It's a carbonated beverage, but it's very tasty.
We'll have to try that. That sounds awesome.
And
It's
a
pretty
few
nice.
parfaits that I think also maybe Rachel's working on too, some protein beverages.
Yeah, we're working on that, but that's using the UHT and the steam generators
yeah.
down until the end of next week.
Yeah, but then she wanted to then mimic some of the like Bolthouse type of product, but using so I did even had to build a base flavor, an oat flavor, and then she wanted a mango flavor, and then she wanted a peach flavor or lychee flavors, and they're layering flavors and coming up with something interesting, and that's also helping us build our library of flavors, which we will use moving forward for those machines.
And that's what
over
we
there.
did this morning. We took 3 individual flavors, we blended them together to make a system that would be unique to you, and then we would then take that and make it as one flavor. So that would be the, whatever you want to call it, we'd name it something. But
Tropical breeze or
yeah, whatever. But that's how, most flavors, you don't just say you add 1 lemon. For a couple reasons. 1, it's very single-dimensional, and you want a multi-dimensional flavor. And 2, it makes it super easy to copy. And I want to make sure it's hard to copy. So I'm going to have 2 or 3 flavors in there minimum in my base system to make sure that you have a pleasurable experience. You're not sure what's in there, but you like it. Like the Slimer. If you didn't know there was a cream note in there, you would just say this is pleasant. But if I told you, it's got lime and it's got the cream and all the other things, I can see that now. So you want it just under the surface.
All right, I've got a bit of a, I want to say, bathroom joke when it comes to content here, but there's an urban myth that vanilla flavoring comes from the behind of beavers.
No, that's an ingredient called castoreum.
Okay.
You know what?
Absolute, which
So-
is not
yeah.
used back in the day. In my dad's day, they used castoreum absolute, which is from a slightly different area of the beaver, was used as a vanilla extract enhancer. That hasn't been done, as far as I know, for 30
A long
years.
time. But so here's the thing about those kind of things. Let's take a skunk for example. And a skunk obviously smells terrible, right? But if I dilute that into the part per trillion level, you could use that same chemical compound to enhance coffee.
Yep, and we do.
Right.
I
And
do.
So yeah,
Wow.
and so you can take. There's nothing wrong with it. Obviously, there's some ethical reasons and those kinds of things. But the compound that comes from scent glands of an animal can be broken apart into constituent components and then used at ridiculously low levels to lift, enhance, or mask things. So you could do it, and probably back in the day it was done, but it's not done anymore.
Yeah.
No.
It's become like an urban myth of
Yeah.
our industry that vanilla
Yeah,
is
that's-
beaver butt.
yeah,
And
that's
it's
somebody with too much free time in their that, on
Thank
a
you for
separate
clarifying.
note, there was another animal-sourced ingredient back in the day called civet tincture, which came from what was called a civet cat in Africa, but it's not really a cat. And it's funny, I saw them when I was in Africa. But long since then, some of the larger companies have developed synthetic molecules, to Derek's point, which mimic that 90+%. So now it's used more often actually in the fragrance industry, if
Yeah.
anything, to give you a masculine, animalic
Musk.
sort of musky
Yeah.
note. 50 years ago, they used
Musk.
musketeer
Musk, yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Now they've since created a plethora of musk-type notes, a few of which are actually food grade, and some are mostly used in fragrances, but a few of them can be used. I use them in trace amounts as a fixative in flavor. So even in some of the brown flavors for Derek, I may use a bit of those natural synthetic musk notes just to support a coffee flavor or maybe a caramel flavor, parts per tens of billion, just to
And-
give that unconscious sort of smoky sort of roasting.
Well, I wish you
note.
would have come here last week, because last week we were making cheesecake flavor, which you'd think
The whole place would
is
smell.
delicious. It is not. It is not delicious.
So the whole place just smelled like crazy.
Oh,
like,
The spray dry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we do the coffee and the cheesecake, I mean, it's great at part per billion level.
Right.
It's not great when you've got gallons of it flowing through a spray dryer on the other side of the wall.
Being heated to 176.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Yeah. Awesome. But then I just walk around rather proudly and go, "That's my flavor." And people hate me.
well, thank you guys so much for your time. This has been super
It's been great. Thank you
informative.
so much.
Thank you.
This has been great. So SupplySide West will be trying some of your stuff. We have Expo Energy coming up, Sensapure Flavors on Instagram and LinkedIn, of course.
Yep.
I don't think I have anything else, but gentlemen, thank you
If
so
anyone
much.
just made it an hour and a half into the podcast, they just heard a name of
You know what?
something that we haven't announced yet.
We got some concept strawberry guava flavored. They're protein shots. They have carbonated gut
Oh, the
health
protein
soda.
shot is a good one. I forgot about that one.
Is this a
Emily
BLG
did that
shot?
one. So yeah, it's
Sure.
3 ounces.
I
Will
think
you
we
talk
hooked
to
you
that
guys
one?
up with Arla for this.
Yeah, it's great. 20 grams of protein in a 3 ounce shot.
Oh,
and
you did it.
yeah, it's
Awesome.
great. It's really, really good.
I think that we're going to be trying those with you guys at Arla's booth. I believe.
Yes.
Okay.
There will be
Macrocap
more
is running
content on
those,
that.
I think.
And I
Yeah.
will say, if anyone is still listening and excited about this, you're hiring. So if you want to move to Salt Lake City and
We are hiring.
Yeah, we're always trying. As we grow, we're looking for new beverage scientists and a trainee flavorist. You need the basic science background, and you need an obsessive love and passion for
Food.
what things taste and smell.
awesome.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you,
Great
guys.
fun.
I
Thanks.
appreciate
We
it.
really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.